All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
And hello and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night. Whenever you listen, however you listen, whether you're watching or listening, welcome. It is a new week, and I would say there's a little bit of a, should we say, whitewater chop to the world of the Democrats today, and there ought to be whitewater chop with the Republicans, given the fact that their guy may just be a couple of steps behind Biden in terms, I'm talking about, of mental acuity. I mean, he's completely disconnected from reality. His lies aren't just lies. He's just pulling it out and saying stuff. But as usual, it's the way Trump speaks. Everybody goes, wow, he just seems so, vibrant. So, but the Biden situation is far more complicated, it would seem, than a simple withdrawal from the race. And a defiant president is what we're talking about today with Gary Dietrich, who is the political analyst for the CBS stations and also for iHeart Radio. And it is True Crime Monday, so Courtney will be by on True Crime Corner. And that's only the beginning. Yeah, we have a lot more than that. In fact, there's a new spot. It's just one of those things that Kim mentioned right before we went on. Kim is here, of course.
Kim, how are you?
The new Lincoln Project spot that's out. And I have to tell you, we'll play it for you. I'm not a huge fan of their spots, and I've done 3 of them. So, of course, the ones I did were terrific. I feel as though their spots generally are overwritten and too long. That's the way I feel. But to be fair, I think it's put together by some pretty talented people, and this is a really good spot. But again, I'll play it for you. As usual, I feel it's too long. Okay. They got a lot of stuff to get to in this spot, but I just feel as though from a pure media standpoint, I think it falls short that way. But that's just my opinion.
I feel also that your voice would have been better on this spot. I mean, no offense to the guy who did it. He's great, but he has some mumbly moments, and I would have preferred a Thompson read.
Well, thank you for that.
I'm not trying to butter your biscuit. I'm just trying being honest.
No, I think that the guy's okay. So I didn't notice that. But thank you for that. There were some, before we started on the air, there were some comments that I think sort of reflect the general vibe, if I can use the word.
The Mark Thompson Show.
DID Hatchery says, we must support Biden now. The media frenzy is ludicrous. He can't be replaced. It's too late to build a coalition. Remember in 1968, Dems ousted their incumbent, causing Nixon to win. It is true, Hubert Humphrey in 68, I guess, did fall short. And that was a winnable election. There might have been other things at play there, DID Hatchery, but I take your point about closing ranks behind Biden. And you certainly do not see that in the most of the week, last week, and certainly over the weekend, as Democrats are privately and then publicly slowly coming out. Kamala has not passed any voter vetting, says Just Give Me the Truth. And no time for a primary season. I changed my mind on this. I think we have to double down on support for Biden. It's what the GOP has done with Trump. That's certainly true. That, if this were the Republican candidate, they wouldn't even look back. Be like, whatever, dude. I just heard an interesting take on Joe Biden's aging. It has not made him worse. It has made him slower, more deliberate. Coming up with a fast quip or lie is Trump's talent, not presidential. Just Give Me the Truth says that. Yeah, this is the point I was making before, which is, again, this has nothing to do with governing. This has nothing to do with abilities when it comes to looking at all the different variables that affect life in this country and around the planet. It has to do with, I'd call it almost a campaign skill, which is your ability to speak, your ability to sell that which you have done and that which you feel you want to do or will do in the next administration. So it's a sales job, but and to try to outsell Donald Trump, you'll never do it because he's making crap up. New improved. I got a new improved healthcare plan. I've got a better plan for the insurrectionists. They're going to build walls. I don't know what. I mean, it's utterly crazy. But it is true that the focus on Joe Biden has taken the oxygen out of the conversation around Trump, and it's put the oxygen, the media oxygen, around Biden. And certainly it's also true, I would say, that the media is in their own doom loop on this. It's just one op-ed after another that I'm reading about how I was a Joe Biden fan, then I saw this, and you know what? This just can't continue. Our worst fears, etc. Biden had an impressive schedule after that debate. The next day, he had a stump speech. Over the weekend, he was, flying around like a guy who wants to be president.
Sure.
He spoke very well, and is it Fetterman in Pennsylvania who spent the day with him? Said, dude, I was with him all day. And he was like doing retail politics, shaking hands, talking to people, on point, focused. This is what Fetterman said. And the other thing Fetterman said, and it was 90 degrees. He said it was pretty challenging. So the truth about Joe Biden is that he's never been a good quipster. He's never been a good salesperson. He's never been a particularly good orator. Donald Trump can slice into pieces if what Trump says is not fact-checked at all. And frankly, Joe Biden is the guy there to fact-check him, at least on a couple of things. So on a couple of those big lies, that's what you need Joe Biden to do. And he's clearly just not that guy now, it wouldn't seem. So this is a good point, and I think this, and then I'll play you the spot and move on. The Dems do a bad job at getting behind the, quote, guy. They are quick to dump. That's from Karen. And this is the point I made initially. When all of this hit, I said, this is what the Democrats do. They kill their own. Al Franken is a classic example of it. And so they oversteer. And the reason that you could consider this oversteering is because there's not a whole lot you can do unless he actually pulls out on his own. The primaries are done. The cake is baked. This is a system by which if you go to a convention, those delegates are pledged to Joe Biden. They will vote for Joe Biden, and he will be the nominee. So what you're talking about is some extra electoral process whereby that we back room with Biden. He thinks, oh my God, we're going to get slaughtered. My approval rating is so low. We're down in the 30s. No president has overcome that kind of low approval rating to win re-election. He'll have to have that come to Jesus moment. If he doesn't have it, there will not be a change. There is nothing that can be done and exerted from the outside to change the way things are. And I mean, this is that processes, protocols, and standards. What is the process and protocols and standards drop? We
have processes and protocols and standards.
They do. They have processes, protocols, and standards. We'll talk to Gary Dietrich more, but that's the way it is.
It's interesting that you say there's nothing that can be done. And you're right, because it has to be President Biden who withdraws from the race. But I was just reading this article on CNN, and the headline is, House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries could decide Biden's fate. As if, if they all get together, the House leaders, and they all send a letter saying, we don't believe in you, that has, that decides, and it doesn't decide.
No, it doesn't. In fact, this is a real misconception on the part of people. The Hakeem Jeffries of the world, the Chuck Schumers of the world, they have nothing to do with whether or not Biden will continue on. Nothing to do with it. They can take their Democratic caucus and say, we're not going to support you. I've talked to other legislators and we're not going to support you. So what? You know who I'm taking my case to? The American people. I have the delegates. I'm going to be the nominee, and I'm going to show you I'm going to beat Trump. That's where Joe Biden is. So I get these are high-profile Democratic Party figures, but they have no power. Kim is right. They have no leverage, really, apart from their media leverage. And as I say, media feeding frenzy, I think it's its own doom loop. It's like, I get it. I got it. But wow, if you put these two candidates up against each other, and they are, I just don't see how you, I'll say it over and over, I vote for Joe Biden on a hospital gurney.
Yes.
Before I vote for Donald Trump, whose intention is to dismantle this country, take away your choices in so many ways. They've already taken women's reproductive choices away, and there's way more than that. Take away all the guardrails on regulation and protections associated with consumer information. Take away all the guardrails, all the regulations / protections on water, air, soil, and toxins. Anyway, this
you and
is
I had an interesting text conversation over the weekend, and it's been rolling around in my brain. I've been kind of thinking about it over and over again and all the different angles to it. And what it boils down to is, are you voting for the person, or are you voting for the party? Right? Are you voting for the administration in place and the ideas and the platform, or are you voting specifically for the person? No.
Well, your question, I think it was a quote from, who was it? Something like...
Yeah, it was the guy in charge of the William Morris Endeavor.
Oh, right. That's Ari Emanuel or something like that?
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. So Ari Emanuel had something like, if it was my grandfather, I'd take his car keys away, and yet somehow he's going to... And they kind of extended that metaphor, right? And now we're going to hand the keys to the car, and Kim sort of was making the point, isn't that right? I mean, that this person who doesn't seem completely connected all the time is going to get the car keys. And I was making the point, no, it's not right. And that's a crappy parallel, the driving the car. First of all, Biden's not driving the car, okay? Meaning, literally, he's not. He's not applying to be an Uber driver, okay? He's applying to run the country with a coalition of people that he's already shown can actually do a pretty goddamn good job, and they did it for 3.5 years. I think he is wildly diminished. I mean, diminished from where he was. I think this diminishment that he deals with is picking up steam. But I also think he just knocked down 3 massively busy, intense days, and he seemed to do with vigor and vibrancy. So I don't think you can put a fork in him yet. I really don't think this is Weekend at Bernie's. But the point that somehow this doddering old man, you'll wake him up at 2:30 in the morning while the missiles are launched, that is such a total BS narrative. And it's just used to get to whatever conclusion generally the right has already reached. So do not accept that idea somehow that, Joe Biden is, so diminished that he couldn't, he couldn't weigh in on any number of things going on. Yeah. I mean, look at all the things that they're dealing with in this administration over the last 3.5 years. Let me show you, what should we do first? I really like that Lincoln Project thing. Kim brought it to class, and it's good.
Let's roll it.
Let's roll the Lincoln Project thing. We might get demonetized because of the money, but it's about, 3.5, 4 minutes? Take a look. Here we go.
November 5th, 2024. Donald Trump defeats a divided and dispirited Democratic campaign. On January 20th, 2025, Donald Trump is sworn in as the 47th President of the United States. Unfortunately, he keeps his promises. Trump seizes control of a divided government, signing hundreds of executive orders implementing Project 2025. Trump replaces over 50,000 civil servants with hardline MAGA loyalists. The federal oath of office now requires declaring loyalty to the president, not the Constitution. Protected by the Supreme Court's grant of total immunity for official acts, Donald Trump orders the Department of Justice to arrest members of the January 6th Commission, current and former DOJ employees, and political opponents for treason, election interference, and conspiracy. He declares it to be an official act. Trump ends birthright citizenship by executive order and turns millions of American-born citizens into illegal aliens overnight. Mass deportations begin. Hundreds of thousands, including legal U.S. residents and American citizens, are imprisoned in newly built camps. Protests erupt. Trump addresses the nation from the Oval Office, invoking the Insurrection Act and declaring the protesters a danger to American sovereignty. He orders the National Guard to use deadly force to suppress the protests. In the wake of the bloody violence, Trump declares nationwide martial law, awarding himself new powers under the freshly signed American Sovereignty Protection Order, which defines protest of immigration policies as non-protected speech and a threat to national security. Governors in New York, California, Illinois, and elsewhere declare their opposition, promising to refuse compliance in their states. Trump orders their arrests. Trump pardons every January 6 attacker, including those who assaulted the police, and in a White House ceremony issues a new presidential medal honoring them. Many are given jobs in his administration. The Department of Education is renamed the Department of American Values and mandates a nationwide Christian nationalist curriculum for all schools receiving federal aid. Trump, joined by Speaker Mike Johnson and evangelical leaders, announces that the Department of Health and Human Services has reclassified mifepristone, making it illegal to distribute or prescribe, as well as new HHS regulations that make IVF treatments impossible to legally administer. Trump reverses one campaign promise by declaring a national abortion ban by executive order. Challenges to his authority are rejected by the Supreme Court, which has seen new appointments from Trump after it was expanded to 12 justices. He signs an executive order removing abortion records from HIPAA privacy regulations and announces a new federal data sharing program so states can monitor women's periods. Thousands are detained while crossing state lines under suspicion of seeking an abortion. Trump's acting Secretary of Defense, a disgraced ex-general, fires over 400 generals and admirals, leaving the military leaderless. Other Trump appointees purge the ranks of the CIA, FBI, and Department of Justice. By executive order, Trump withdraws the United States from NATO and ends Pentagon cooperation with Ukraine. Russian tanks enter Kyiv. Vladimir Zelensky is killed. It is announced that Trump will run for a third term, claiming he was unfairly cheated in the 2020 election. His Supreme Court ultimately agrees with this interpretation, paving the way for Trump's 2028 re-election. If you hear all this and believe it isn't possible, then ask yourself, what did you believe was impossible just 8 years ago? This isn't a fantasy. It's Trump's plan, and he's counting on you to believe it couldn't happen.
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, that's Rick Wilson, the actual, I think he started the Lincoln Project, he's the voiceover guy. Mm-hmm. So I take issue with those who say it couldn't happen. I mean, it's already really, if you will, they've already begun to mold the clay of that which they just described. All mega Trump supporters think that Project 2025 is just political speech. Project 2025 will be the undoing of democracy, and you can bet on it. I think that's exactly right. Thank you, Vilma, for the super chat.
Big shout out.
I don't think, and again, as I say, I don't love Lincoln Project stuff. It goes on, you could tell there, I mean, that should have been shorter, but it is what it is. But I also think that the stuff at the end is powerful and it's real. I mean, they essentially try to do it. They've really got that plan. Here's a, let me get something. Just want to respond to a couple, and then I'm going to play something else for you. Carol, all things in this video are in Project 2025. Exactly. That's why I really feel like, I don't know. They'd never do that. The video is scary, but a little over the top. It's doing a good job. Yeah, I mean, everything in politics is a little over the top. Although, I mean, if I told you they're going to roll back Roe v. Wade and abortion is going to be illegal in 19 states overnight, you go, Mark, please, first of all, they always talk about Roe v. Wade, blah, blah, blah. Well, they did it, okay? And they're not stopping there. I agree with Kim. Mark would have been a better voiceover. Thank you. Thank you. I like this. Trump says, I don't know what Project 2025 is, and I disagree with it. Is that what Trump said? DeHogwell says that's what Trump did disavow it, but it's very funny how he does it. I don't know anything about it, and I disagree with it. Okay. Well, I don't know how you disagree with something you don't know anything about. But the other stuff I saw in there, most MAGA supporters, that's, I was just reading that, Vilma, something similar to that. Thank you, Vilma. Big shout out to Vilma, always with us. Wes,
Big shout out.
Big shout out to you as well. Thank you for the super sticker for $5. Randy always has some stir the pot comment. Just excuses. We're not voting for an administration. We're voting for the president as an individual leader. You're wrong. You're voting for both. You're voting for an administrator, an administration, and for a leader. So to the extent that the president is the front man in this case, I'll say it because a woman is yet to be in there, sadly. But so you're voting for a front man, that is somebody who has to sell U.S. policy abroad, do various things that sort of represent a communication between their administration and the people. So that's the bully pulpit that you hear so much about. But if you say we're not voting for an administration, you're wrong. You're voting for an administration. Let me give you a really clear, recent example. The Donald Trump administration was headed by a guy who was on the golf course all day, every day, effectively. Look it up. Look at the number of days that he was in office and then he was golfing. But before you do that, listen to what the rest of what I have to say. So, he'd be in a bathrobe till 11 a.m., watching Fox and Friends. Then he'd come down and he'd get maybe an hour of meetings, very little, and then it was lunchtime, and then it was golf. So how did they get all that stuff with immigrants and with the tariffs, and how did they get that done? Through his administration. That's how. So his administration was infested with all of these poisonous, toxic people who wanted to reshape this country. And Bill Barr, who's now like the enemy of my enemy is my friend, Bill Barr, the Democrats talk about him like he's on their side just because he's an anti-Trumper now. And he's not even really. He actually is open to the idea of voting for Trump because he doesn't want to vote for a Democrat. He views the Democrats as too progressive. Bill Barr, who was fired from the Trump administration, he was carrying the water for Trump too. That's the administration. That's not Trump. Who else is in his administration? Jared Kushner, his son-in-law, his daughter, his two sons. They couldn't get security clearance, but he bigfooted it, Trump did. And he got them all top secret security clearance. That's his administration. The Roger Stones, the Steve Bannons, those are people who were in the constellation of people that were affecting U.S. policy. Don't tell me, Randy, that you don't vote for an administration. Because if you don't, you're missing 3/4 of the point. In Washington, it's the machine, man. And you could take Biden and put him upstairs in front of golf, and you could probably, to be perfectly frank, do fine for 4 years. The problem is, in this media environment, you need a president who can communicate. I made this point the other day. It is part of the set of skills you require. People need to stop having so little belief in our democracy and our systems of government, he says. Okay.
Didn't we see how fragile it was, though, on January 6th? Didn't we see that, we need to shore it up, that we need to have more than belief?
You should have Professor Alan Lichtman on your show, Mark, says Derek Taylor. Thank you for the 10 spot, which is a super chat. And
big shout out.
Appreciate it. He has predicted every presidential election since 1984. And he said that Biden is the best chance for Democrats to win. Well, we might do that. I'd like to get him on, or I'll tell you what, we'll track down one of his videos. And I believe that Biden and his team, listening to what Professor Lichtman said of Biden's chances of winning the presidency in November. I mean, here's what the truth is, and we'll talk to Gary about this, but the truth is that Biden feels he can. And Biden feels it passionately, and Biden feels as though, oh, I get it. The press is out to get me, the Washington establishment is out to get me, but the people who connect with me, they're going to hear my stump speeches. They're going to realize I'm actually an advocate for them. Trump is just a one-dimensional rhetorical advocate. He talks a good game, but of course doesn't care about them at all, just wants to get big tax cuts in, wants to completely undo all EPA regulations, all financial regulations, regulations on Wall Street. They want it all to go away. As I've told you, the next thing, I don't think the voters are thinking about this, but I've been talking about this for years. They want to privatize everything. So they'll privatize the post office, privatize a bunch of the military, which is already done with contractors, as you're aware, and so on. Many, many parts of American life would be privatized, commercialized. The lady Beatrice, we need to keep Biden in because we don't know who else can beat Trump. Yeah, and I don't know that this guy, thank you, Lady Beatrice.
Big shout out.
I don't know that this guy, Biden, can beat Trump either. It's a weird time. But I'm afraid I'm swinging back toward, it doesn't appear as though there's going to be an easy way to vault Harris to top of ticket without him stepping back, and I don't see it. But we'll talk to Gary Dietrich about it in a moment. So,
The Mark Thompson Show.
I want to get some news. There's a hurricane, major hurricane hitting Texas. Can we do some turbo news, and then we'll get to Gary Dietrich, and then Tony. I put aside some videos that I want to share with the class, and we'll do them after Gary Dietrich. I'll do them, and maybe drop one of them during Gary Dietrich. I'll tell Gary that we're going to drop it. I won't just drop it on him while he's speaking. That wouldn't be very nice. And I think an American is doing very well at Wimbledon. And, so that's the, I thought, yeah. Well, it's a cursory summary. Here is the news, and then Gary Dietrich talks politics. Smash the like button if you would, please. Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
On the Mark Thompson Show, I'm Kim McAllister, and this report is sponsored by CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. Tropical storm Beryl bringing heavy rains and damaging winds to Texas. That according to the National Hurricane Center's latest advisory. Beryl, now about 45 miles northwest of Houston, maximum sustained wind 65 miles per hour. More than 2.5 million customers are without power as Beryl lashes Texas, and hundreds of flights are canceled or delayed as Beryl lashes the Houston area. 500 flights canceled out of Bush International Airport, 160 flights canceled out of Hobby Airport. President Biden
They say
wants
thousands in Texas without electricity, says Gordon.
Yeah. 2.5 million without power, actually. So
wow, that's a lot.
that was the top sentence of that story. Yeah, 2.5 million customers.
I'm sorry. I
no
missed
power.
That. I was
yeah.
trying to read the comments. Okay,
no, I'm
sorry.
with you.
Go ahead.
President Biden wants his doubters to challenge him during the Democratic convention. During a phone interview with MSNBC today, the president tried to address concerns coming from his own party about his mental fitness. President Biden said those Democrats should run against him and challenge him at the convention in August. Well, largest wildfire burning in California continues to grow in size. As of Monday morning's update from CAL FIRE, the Lake Fire in Santa Barbara County has burned more than 20,000 acres of land. It is just 8% contained. This is a big one. One structure damaged. There's been one injury as well. It's unclear if that was to a firefighter or to a civilian in this area, but the fight continues in Santa Barbara County. The jurors in the Massachusetts murder trial of Karen Reed voted to acquit her of murdering her Boston police officer boyfriend before a mistrial was declared last week. That's according to a motion filed Monday by Reed's lawyers. Reed is accused of killing John O'Keefe with her SUV and leaving him to die in a snowstorm. Defense attorney Alan Jackson filed a motion to dismiss 2 charges, citing double jeopardy protections. A status hearing set for July 22nd. And Alec Baldwin's involuntary manslaughter trial is set to begin. He is in a Santa Fe courthouse today for a pre-trial hearing, and jury selection will start tomorrow. He faces 18 months in jail if convicted in the accidental death of Rust cinematographer Helena Hutchins on the movie set in 2021. Baldwin was rehearsing with a prop gun for a scene when it went off, killing Hutchins. The brutal heat wave scorching the western U.S. continues this week. The National Weather Service says dozens of daily record temperatures will be tied or broken across the West Coast as temperatures hit the 110s. Redding, California, saw temperatures hit 119. Phoenix setting a record for the warmest low temperature at 92. Cities including Portland, San Diego, and Boise remain under excessive heat warnings. And because I know you couldn't really do without this story, I'll give it to you. You're welcome. The Yankees' George Costanza bobblehead doll is reselling for big bucks on eBay. So if you have one of these things, hold on to it or
Tony,
put it up on
rally
eBay.
A picture of the George Costanza bobblehead.
Last Friday night,
Yankees have it. Go ahead.
The Yankees gave out a bobblehead doll of the beloved Seinfeld character played by actor Jason Alexander on the hit sitcom to the first 18,000 fans at the stadium. As of this afternoon, the dolls were reselling for more than $200 on eBay. You get it for free at the game. You pop it up on eBay. Done. Look at that. And I see that we have it looks like Tony has a picture he's going to put up. Check it out. There it is. Yeah.
Wow, that's really funny.
$200 for that thing. And people are snapping them up on eBay. Yeah. I mean, I can see the appeal of it. The George Costanza bobblehead.
I love bobbleheads, so I get it. Yeah.
This report is sponsored by Coachella Valley Coffee. Oh, is it good? I've got my Coachella Valley tea in my hot little hand.
It's so good.
Put that coffee down.
Well, I'm not going to put it down. It's the I went right with the solid espresso today, not even stovetop, right out of the machine. Just got the machine back. And it's, what can I say? It's it's divine. Excuse me.
A little bit of heaven.
It's a taste of paradise, friends.
Yep.
Coachella Valley coffee, handcrafted in the Coachella Valley, the desert of California. They serve the entire world, and everything there is hand roasted. It's terrific. And again, it's not just coffee. Teas and other things you can get on the website abound. So go to the website and check it out, CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. And here's the key. Whatever you get, if you sign up for a subscription, maybe they're going to send you, again, like £2 a month or whatever it might be, which is oftentimes a more cost-effective way to go. Get the discount. You'll get the discount on anything you order there. Mark T is the discount. So go to CoachellaValleyCoffee.com, knock around. There are a lot of tasting notes. The coffee is magnificent. Get it, order it, and then on your way out at checkout, Mark T is your discount code, and it's 10% off on anything that you get on the site. So we love having them as a sponsor, and I love when people support our sponsors, and I love when they are sponsors that really step up and provide something that's extraordinary, and that's what Coachella Valley Coffee is. So,
I'm Kim McAllister, and this is The Mark Thompson Show.
They had to close down an entire radio station to silence him. And now, he's here. Ladies and gentlemen, Mark Thompson.
Yes, thank you very much. My gosh. It is great to have everybody here. This is our Monday show. We are live for 2 hours, and then you can watch this show or listen to the show whenever you want across all major podcast platforms, and of course here on YouTube, which is sort of our home platform. And then we break out videos as well. Thank you for sharing them. We passed 35,000 subscribers just a couple of days ago, which is cool for, we have no money. We just, word of mouth, and people come and we get, I think, some really great guests and have some really great conversations. So I appreciate everybody who supports us and who have shared the show. So in that spirit of great guests, let me move on.
The Mark Thompson Show.
He is the political analyst for CBS Television and iHeart Radio, the longtime voice of politics on KGO. How about it for Gary Dietrich? Hey, Gary.
Hey, Mark. And Mark, I just say this. I'm probably one of the few people who really is actually not only knows where, but has been to the Coachella Valley. So way to go, bro. I want some of that coffee. You got to ship some my way. We'll taste her.
I'll tell you what. I will truly send you a little taster. Yeah, I got to get that organized, but I'll get it organized quickly. So look, we have two things going on, it seems to me. We have political realities, we have life realities, and then we have process. So I guess that would be three things. Political realities and process I kind of put in the same category. I wonder if you could sort out this controversy with a defiant Joe Biden and with this feeding frenzy around the notion of him stepping down.
Yeah, well, Mark, I was really thinking about this as I was getting ready to jump on with you here, my brother, that here's the biggest overarching problem, and then I'll dive into those two real quickly. The overarching problem is that the main thing has become not the main thing for the Democrats. The main thing we've heard for months, if not years, is defeating Donald Trump. The problem right now is that the political battle has shifted. And so the political battle is now within the Democratic Party very, very clearly. And so sight is being lost of the gigantic objective of their political war. So what do I mean by that? We have what's unfolding with Biden. Everybody knows that now. The last 10 days have been unprecedented, starting with the debate, continuing with the Stephanopoulos interview, and then remarkably, and this is what I want to focus on, the president calling into Morning Joe this morning, because it is very clear that the wagons have not only been circled, but every single piece of political armament they have is now focused outside of that circle of wagons. And think Yellowstone 1883, think Horizon, think what you want to think in terms of an analogy. But that is where the Biden White House and the Biden campaign is. It is ultimate circle the wagons time. And the problem is, what you heard on Morning Joe this morning is the biggest single problem. The president has said basically, I mean, it was amazing to me, Mark. He called out fellow Democrats, said, listen, bring it on. You want to challenge me at the convention? Go ahead. That's what it's going to take. And I'll tell you what, that has been the biggest fear on Capitol Hill, is that when they got back today, they were going to try to put together a House and Senate, some kind of delegations, some kind of building of some kind of consensus or momentum to say, Mr. President, this is the week. That's what you keep hearing from donors, from Congress, from us. This is the week we got to make a decision about what we're going to do. And so what does the president do? He throws down the gauntlet on Morning Joe on the Monday morning and says, I don't want to listen to you, quote unquote, elites, you so-called party bigwigs. I'm in this thing. You want to bring it on? Bring it on in Chicago in August.
So one of the things that can be played for dramatic and political gain is that last thing that you said, Gary Dietrich, which is, I'm going up against big media. I'm going up against the political elites because I have a responsibility to the people. The people have put me here and the people will propel me to victory. So, kind of playing the insider-outsider game strikes me. But beyond that, it seems as though this feeding frenzy, and this doom loop that the op-ed people have, cranked up. I might have read 30 op-eds about how he should drop out and all this, and every parallel analogy, etc. So help me with the realities now. I get it. He's dug in. He feels the aggrieved party right now. What are the realities?
Well, I'll tell you the biggest single reality, Mark. There's a couple of realities. One is, you can't divorce any of these, okay? The political environment is made up of several different aspects, right? One of them is the media. And you rightly pointed out, Mark, I think the media now, the consensus is almost universal in the media. Biden's going to have to go. It's just a matter of when and how. I mean, wouldn't you say that is by far, to me, 80 to 90% of what you're hearing out of the media world. And then secondly is the political reality. All of his, backers in Congress and beyond, and importantly, all of those Democrats that have to run in November, from Senate candidates to House candidates to state governorships to state legislators. That is another political wave that clearly is building. More members of the House came out over the weekend, said he needed to go. And these are not backbenchers. 4 members of the Democratic House leadership, the ranking members of their committees, including guys like Jerry Nadler, who've been around a long time, are saying, that's it, time to go. But here's the political reality, Mark, that I think you're trying to get at. The lever, to me, of power that is going to eventually, I think, be pulled is the cutoff of major donors from presidential campaign contributions. They say they're shifting their monies now to House and Senate races. There are people saying, even the daughter of Disney said, I'm not giving any more until I hear that the president is stepping aside or he's made a decision that we all can agree on. And that, to me, Mark, that's the lever of power, shutting off the spigot of campaign contributions, or at least turning it down to 50%. That may be the one that finally says, well, everybody else can say what they want, but we got to pay for TV ads.
Right. This is a point that we made last week with that Disney, Abigail Disney move was, really high profile, along with others, though, as you suggest, and some pretty high profile kind of in the glitterati of Hollywood pulling back from Biden as well. He has to release his delegates, though, doesn't he? The delegates are
absolutely
his. Yeah. And the only person who has access to that war chest, which is a significant one, is Kamala Harris.
Well, there's an interesting dynamic in that as well. As the details are coming out more about this, people need to understand that there's very arcane and very complex rules about PAC donations, about donations to campaigns, which are very different rules than, as you know, Mark, to PACs. So how the math being done right now internally in the Biden campaign and in Washington is, okay, how much of that pie would, quote unquote, automatically go to Harris and how much wouldn't? How much would have to have donor approval or some other mechanism to make that happen? That's on the money side of it. On the delegate side of it, you have it exactly right. I think anybody in the know now knows this. Biden has to release the delegates for them to be assigned or voluntarily go to somebody else. They really can't be assigned. But even there's now, there's the legal beagles starting to dig deep and say, okay, well, let's get down into the nitty gritty of what the meaning of the word is when it comes to delegate loyalty, pledges, and responsibility. And there are some who are beginning to say, well, you know what? They don't absolutely 100% have to vote for Joe. There might be some wiggle room for them not to do that. So all those things are playing out, Mark, at the same time.
Wow. I see so few good moves for Joe Biden. I see an amplified sense of almost scrutiny, I would call it. The president was always scrutinized, but now, his every utterance on the campaign trail, which he actually had a pretty good weekend. I mean, he was out there. It seemed like a pretty demanding weekend, and he met those demands. I was saying that Fetterman said it was 90 degrees, and he was out there doing retail politics. But I feel as though the momentum is just so much against the guy right now that despite his Morning Joe protestations and his various media appearances, it's really hard to stem this tide. You're not a big prediction guy necessarily. But can you percentage it for me, like the chances of him actually stepping back?
Yeah. Well, Mark, you know me. I don't like to get into the proverbial who's going to win this November. Can you imagine answering that question 2 weeks ago compared to today?
Yes, thank you. That's a great point.
This is why I don't get into that game. I've been in politics for 3.5 decades and in media equally as long. And here's the reality of it. I've worked on campaigns, as you know, Mark, from legislative to presidential. I've worked in our Senate and Assembly. I've been at the highest levels of media stuff on the network. And here's what I've come to learn. Anybody who will tell you they think they know what's going to happen on November 5th right now. And by the way, I'm going to include in that who thinks for sure they know Donald Trump is going to win, doesn't know what they're talking about in a historical context. In reality, so much can happen even in the next 4 months. But having said that, I'm not going to make any hard and fast predictions, but I can tell you, and I am a very keen observer about what is and what is likely to happen and what is possible to happen, not what somebody thinks they would want to happen or wants to toe a party line. And here's what the reality is. The momentum against President Biden has become, I would say, getting close to overwhelming. When you have members of his own party, members of the party leadership structure, people in his own White House now talking to the media quite openly, as you know, about the last, especially 6 to 9 months of the president's performance. The donor class, it is becoming very, very difficult, to use your words, Mark, to see a path out of the woods for this because it is, in most people's minds, a somewhat intractable trend line that President Biden is fighting against, swimming upstream, and everybody is waiting for the next car wreck, the next shoe to drop, whatever analogy you want to say, that at some moment he's going to have another quote-unquote bad night or bad day, and then truly it will be over. That's the challenge for the White House and the president right now.
Corinda says Americans are ungrateful, and one mistake and and he's under the bus. Americans are ungrateful. One mistake and he's under the bus. No one remembers all the good that he's done for the country. This is one of the problems with that abysmal performance. It does focus the questions around his mental acuity and not around an extremely accomplished guy. When you look at 3.5 years, it was a divided country when he came in. It was in the middle of COVID. You got to give the guy credit. He did a lot of great things with some pretty strong political headwinds. This infrastructure bill that he got through was extraordinary. I mean, it was transformational. He got the Medicare negotiation around drugs and pharmaceuticals. These are things that Trump and the Republicans talk about, but of course they never actually put in. Instead, it's tax cuts, et cetera. But these policies don't matter as long as it all becomes how he's doing in terms of mental acuity.
Well, Mark, you have the actual narrative conundrum down pat, and it is this. Okay, in politics and in modern politics in particular, we want black and white. We want either or. Either Biden did fantastic and he'll do fantastic in the future, or we have to discount everything he did in the past and he's therefore not going to be any good in the future. No, it's not either or, it's both and. I think for many, what you're hearing out of most members of Congress is this narrative. Yes, he is an honorable man. He did fantastic things in our view as Democrats in the past, not just in his 3.5 years in the White House, but over the course of many decades. However, and what we're seeing, what the trend lines that are coming out, what you heard from people in the media and in the White House and people close to him who've been in meetings with him, we are concerned about the future. It's not the last 3.5 years. It's next 4.5.
This is something Randy agrees with you on, but we're not talking about what happened in the past regarding Biden's administration. We're concerned more so than ever for the future. That's essentially what Gary just said. I do think, to be fair, and I think you're allowed to reference accomplishments because I think, past accomplishments can be reflective of future likely accomplishments. So I don't think it's completely, it's like, that was the infrastructure plan, whatever, we're not talking about that anymore. All right. So I have a quick question about down ballot because, House and Senate in play. Can you speak to some of these races that aren't presidential races in key states?
Oh, this is so important, Mark. It gets lost, but it really shouldn't get lost, okay? The House and the Senate are both in play. Both parties know this. The Democrats have the deck stacked against them just by the calendar because a third of the Senate is up for election every 2 years because they're 6-year terms, right? In this particular cycle, and this is a challenge for Democrats, and they're well aware of this, they are much more vulnerable. They have many more members in vulnerable states than they would have had in other election cycles for a long time. And that's the problem in the Senate. In the House, we know the razor-thin margin. In California, for example, just take California. There are about 6 seats that are true swing states where vulnerable Republicans are really being challenged. There's one in the state capital region, Kevin Kiley, who is really under the gun, and they're coming after him, a first-term Republican. And believe it or not, and the people find this hard to believe, California could be the determining factor. How those 6 seats, right, amongst everything else in the country, could determine who literally controls the House, therefore who literally controls the budget process, could put the brakes on any Trump legislation, et cetera, et cetera. But the problem for down ticket races, and this is where the political calculus has flipped, Mark, in the last month. I was telling people, look, House Republicans are very vulnerable because they're going to have to answer for the Trump convictions. The first thing that a reporter is going to ask when they go into that district is, so you're behind Trump? Well, Trump's getting a reprieve, as you know, because this Thursday was supposed to be his sentencing in that case. And it's been pushed to September because of the Supreme Court's immunity case last week. So now the calculus, and this is what happens in politics. This is what I was saying earlier about anybody thinks they can tell me what's going to happen in the House, Senate, and the White House come November. Go count your checkers again. Because now Democrats are on the defensive. Every Democratic House member, every Democratic member who's up in the U.S. Senate is going to be asked this one question. Do you think President Biden is your best candidate in November, and will you stand behind him now? That is a very tough position to be put in a swing district.
Now, that's a really interesting point because it puts a fine point on the on-the-spot question that is, I think it's kind of an analog to the question that's asked to GOP running, various candidates saying, do you accept the results of the last election? You know what I mean? It's sort of like, listen, before we start, GOP, it's, do you accept the results of the last election? Democrats is, do you accept that Joe Biden is your best? That's a really great take, Gary Dietrich. So Democrats are truly vulnerable. Donald Trump, at least by much of the recent polling, right now is the likely winner. And it's very possible he'll have the House and Senate when he wins. It's possible. Again, it's a real battle. All right, last thing I reflect on with Gary Dietrich is California. We often think that our vote doesn't matter. It's a bunch of Democrats here. It's a supermajority, blah, 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 blah. But Gary Dietrich just gave us the reasons why the vote is really important. California could be pivotal in this upcoming election. Pal, I'm so excited to have you part of our show. And again, you can find Gary Dietrich across the CBS television network and on iHeart Radio as well as a political analyst for both. He's here on Mondays, and great to have you here, man. A lot going on. There's once in a lifetime craps going on now, right?
That's exactly right. I mean this when I just finished meeting with a friend who's been in politics with me for 35 years, and we agree, Mark. We've never seen anything like this. One last thing about the House races, I'll just throw this in. Turnout, turnout, turnout. If you have a weak top of the ticket, either side, that can drive those House outcomes substantially. That's something Democrats are now very aware of.
Gary Dietrich, thanks. Look forward to next time. Gary Dietrich, everybody. Bye, Gary.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Wow. Put such a fine point on it, But it's true. We've got a couple of Trumpies in the mix.
Uh-oh.
In the whitewater rafting trip that is our comment section. Feel free to comment. I am hopeful that you share this show and we begin to increase our footprint. A lot of people are excited about my new hire here on the show.
I am very excited about your new hire.
Yeah. This is our new hire. It is, and you may not recognize, it's Mr. Predicto, everybody. Yeah. Because I think Mr. Predicto is needed. These are tough times, and Mr. Predicto. There he is. All right. So now, Mr. Predicto.
Definitely yes.
Yeah, we can begin to, he was a little premature on his prediction. We have one more hour of the show, Mr. Predicto, I don't need to tell you that, Mr. Predicto. Any questions for Mr. Predicto before we continue? Will we get to the video clips that I sent Tony early this morning? Will we get to those or not, Mr. Predicto?
The answer is yes.
Wow, the answer
nice.
is yes, Tony.
Okay.
We'll see.
All right, putting Mr. Predicto over here.
It's a strong possibility.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Predicto. All right. Smash the like button like a boss if you would. It costs nothing. We really do appreciate it. We are a
with your iron
crowd-funded show. We're like NPR or PBS. Like, without you guys, we don't exist.
Except
and Tony
more fun.
Tony Uptits, what's that? It's
more fun than NPR, right?
Yeah. The list of people who support this show through Patreon and PayPal, we update that. And I've got a couple of new names that I'll share with you in the second hour. You can visit our website, themarkthompsonshow.com, and there are links to Patreon and PayPal and also to, I think, our merch site. And you don't want to go to getmarkmerch.com. You can have a throw pillow like that one behind me.
That's really nice.
Yes.
You need to send one of those to Gary Dietrich.
You're right.
So he can cozy up with it at night.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
Okay. Anyway, there it is, all the merch. Wow.
Yeah.
A lot of the phrases from the show on various things. There's that throw pillow. Yeah. It's for the discerning consumer, But
You can buy a Movado watch in Sam's.
right. Well, you could do that, or you could buy a, throw pillow for a lot less than a Movado watch. All right. Another news update from Kim, briefly. Then I'll jump into a huge deal, an agreement made with a major American company and the Justice Department. I also will touch on bird flu. The Italian hotspot that is turning tourists away. But why they are turning tourists away is amazing. And it's a reflection of the times. You know, Kim, I try to do stories that are interesting on their own, but they reflect the larger scene. You know what I'm trying to say, Kim, when I talk about these things? I mean, a lot of people...
What can you tell us about the scene?
A lot of people would just do the story because it's interesting. I'm trying to make a broader point. It's far more challenging. Yeah. You get it, Kim.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right.
I blame you.
So, Kim's news, a turbo news. We're going to update on that hurricane and all the rest, and we continue. Also, True Crime Corner in the next hour, and we will get to those clips that relate to Biden calling into morning television and being defiant today. So, all of that to continue. Smash the like button like a boss if you would. Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
On the Mark Thompson Show, I'm Kim McAllister. President Biden is again making his case for staying in the 2024 race. As you heard Mark and Gary Dietrich mention, the president called into MSNBC this morning and said he isn't going anywhere, adding he is the best candidate to beat Donald Trump. This comes as more Democrats publicly ask him to drop out due to concerns about his mental fitness. Boeing will plead guilty to criminal fraud over 2 fatal 737 MAX airplane crashes, one in 2018, one in 2019. The Justice Department saying Sunday the aircraft maker violated a 2021 settlement that protected the company from prosecution. Boeing also agreeing now to pay a $243 million fine. An independent compliance monitor will oversee the company now for 3 years. It's huge.
That was what I was talking about when I talked about a major American company making a deal with the Justice Department, and they're lucky. I think they're involved in the murder of those sweet souls that went down in those 2 planes. And when you actually look at what Boeing did, and you look at the regulatory capture, right? All you have, and I guess again, the GOP talks about the burdensome regulations, and the reality is those regulations and protections apply to the building of aircraft, the way all of these things are maintained, that is to say, maintenance of aircraft. So these are things, they're regulations, there's oversight. And what you had in Boeing was a company that captured the agency that was supposed to oversee it. So the FAA was captured by Boeing. And essentially Boeing, and this is important because it's instructive for other corporate criminals, they became their own cops. We'll watch it. We'll self-police. You'll hear this a lot. And as I say, you'll hear it with other companies on toxic dumping, on emissions, on all the rest. And then later, of course, it comes out that there's no self-policing. And indeed, in the case of Boeing, whistleblower after whistleblower talked about the fact that maintenance was shoddy, construction was shoddy. So in this instance, I just feel like there's blood all over Boeing's hands, and in a way, they've gotten away easily.
Yes, this is very true. Let's talk about the next story, which is record-setting heat in Death Valley claiming a victim. This is unfortunate. Authorities say a motorcyclist died over the weekend from heat exposure in the area as temperatures soared to a record 128. 128 in Death Valley. Killed a motorcyclist. The unidentified motorcyclist was part of a group of 6 riders who got caught in the scorching heat as they rode through the Badwater Basin area. The other 5 were treated for heat-related illnesses. And it goes to something you were talking about recently, Mark, which is people, act like there's been no change. We saw it with the pilgrimage, the Hajj, right? Where people just go on about their business like the conditions haven't changed in the world. And they have.
Yeah, it's normalcy bias. You have a bias toward going, well, this is just a bad couple of days. It's going to be fine. We do it every year. Everything you do that's out there in the environment has to be recalibrated now a little bit. So, yeah, the Hajj was a great example. And then that poor soul who lost his life in the desert of California.
Crazy. San Francisco, new cameras on the Bay Bridge are being commended for helping nab a road rage shooter. The CHP says this new high-tech flock cameras were able to identify the shooter in last week's road rage incident on the bridge. The suspect is a San Pablo man taken into custody on Friday. The cameras provide law enforcement with real-time information and alerts to identify and locate vehicles associated with criminal activity. There is, speaking of arrests, a Cloverdale man facing charges now for a brush fire near Geyserville. CAL FIRE officials say the suspect was taken into custody over the weekend in connection with the 11-acre pocket fire. Investigators believe that fire was started by using a riding lawnmower in a 4-foot-tall cured annual grass. The suspect faces felony and several misdemeanors for allegedly starting that fire. Now, a story about sunscreen. With summer now well underway, New Jersey Congressman Josh Gottheimer is calling on the FDA to ramp up innovation when it comes to sunscreen. Last time the FDA approved any new active sunscreen ingredients, 1999. Gottheimer says health agencies need to provide more guidance on how to use it, as it can be confusing to navigate information online, like how much to use and how frequently. So I didn't think it was confusing. Were you having a problem using your sunscreen?
Well, apparently it's more complicated than I used to think it was, which I really thought I was kind of in the put a bunch in your hand and slop it onto your body category, but I guess there's more to it than that.
You come out of the water, you do it again, right? I mean, it just seemed like, like it was okay to me. I don't know.
Yeah. Look at this. Mark says, hey, Kim, Boeing killed hundreds of people in those plane crashes, and they're fine. Is half of a Trump... fine is half of a Trump's, the corrupt New York politicians and judges. Can you believe it? Didn't quite get it. Yeah. I mean, the system is definitely geared toward those with money, and in this case, as you know, is wildly geared toward major corporations. No
I think he's
about
saying
it.
it's a drop in the bucket for Boeing, right? Is it really going to hurt them to pay
I
that
see.
much?
Yeah, of course not. That's why I think it's just so brutal.
Speaking of money, I had to go see this movie this weekend. I took 7 boys to this movie. Despicable Me 4.
Oh, my God.
The reason it's soaring at the box office specifically because
people like
I
you.
went. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
The Despicable Me 4 is at the top of the box office weekend. Illumination's latest sequel in their hit animated franchise released Wednesday, pulling in $122.6 million over the holiday weekend.
Wow.
I know, hotly
There's
anticipated.
never been anything like this.
Yeah, it does seem pretty, because the movie is, according to Michael Snyder, the Culture Blaster on Friday, he said it was sort of mediocre.
I know, it was. Yeah, it was very loud. It was a very loud, kind of just overwhelming the senses kind of movie.
I see.
Yeah. Pixar's sequel Inside Out 2 finished second with $30 million. A Quiet Place Day 1 third with an estimated total of $21 million. Meanwhile, a 24 newest film Maxine, which Michael Snyder also gave us a review on, opened below expectations, only earning $6.7 million despite the final installment of a popular horror trilogy. So didn't do so well.
Yeah, they actually, Michael Snyder's review seemed like they put together a pretty great movie.
Well, Bad Boys Ride or Die rounded out the top 5 with $6.5 million. So that's how
they're
it
still
went
riding. They're not dying.
No, they're still riding. We talked about Santa Barbara in the last newscast and this big fire there. One of the residences at risk, Neverland Ranch, former home of Michael Jackson, being threatened by this wildfire in Santa Barbara County. And because it's so hot there, it's really hard for crews to contain the flames. The lake fire continues to grow, so do the evacuation orders. The fire has already torched more than 20,000 acres, so it's currently the largest in California so far this year. 1 building damaged, 1 injury reported. Not sure whether that's a firefighter or a civilian. And again, Neverland Ranch is now at risk as well. So,
yeah.
Go
Go ahead.
I was going to tell you the widow of John Belushi has died. Judy Belushi Pisano died Friday at the age of 73 after a reported battle with cancer. She was an actress and producer, the wife of the Animal House actor and Saturday Night Live star John Belushi. They met when they were attending Wheaton High School in Illinois. They got married in 1976 and were together until he died from a drug overdose in 1982. So she has passed away.
That's sad. Phineas points out that Bob Seger is still alive. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's good. We like that.
I needed that.
Yeah.
That might just carry me through the day. Thank you.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
I am Kim McAllister. This is The Mark Thompson Show.
Put that coffee
The
down.
Mark Thompson Show.
Who's Mark Thompson?
Feels good.
When they raided Mar-a-Lago, God didn't like that.
What up, everybody? Glad that you made it by. This is our live show. We do 2 hours every day, Monday through Friday, and then you can find this show carved up like a Halloween pumpkin. That's right. Tony carves it up. He goes in and he makes decisions. He's really producing the video releases every day.
Thanks, Tony.
On Mondays and Tuesdays.
On Mondays and Tuesdays, yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
Albert does the other ones. Credit where credit's due.
Yes. Nonetheless, I just wanted to recognize that you can find bunches of the show in, as I say, in YouTube, the YouTube universe on this platform. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, and you'll know whenever there's a video. There's a video probably coming later this week, which will be a eulogy to my dad. It will be short, but it'll be kind of, many of you have asked and been so sweet. I must tell you, our community, for those who are new, my father just died a couple weeks ago, and this community has really been so beautiful. And people have even made contributions in Dad's memory, and it's really quite special. Julie Caucus just became a $20 Patreon member. Come on, big shout out.
Big shout out.
Julie, thank you. Really does help. We are a crowd-funded show, so it matters. Appreciate you new Patreon subscribers. You know, Kim, I get notifications when there's a new subscriber, and it's really a great feeling to know that we're growing. But I also get notifications when people drop off.
That
and
hurts.
that's a bad feeling, and we're running about neutral. But it also happens, you know, after the initial exuberance, you know,
Sure.
people kind of begin to huff and puff or whatever, or life intercedes. So I got a bad email about Rothman. I'll share that with, people angry at Rothman. Bill in Berkeley says, Kamala Harris was tough on crime, yet opposed to the death penalty, a stance I greatly admire. So I'm getting like little bits and pieces from people about policy positions from Kamala Harris. In a way, they're looking ahead to the general notion that Biden would step back. But there's nothing in what Biden's public statements, or even, it would seem, private meetings reflect to suggest he's going to step back right now. Now, maybe it takes time for this erosion of support to actually meet what he sees as a reality. Now, Tony, I would say, play me, what's the first thing I wanted, the video. Do you have it there? This is from the actual sit-down with George Stephanopolis. It was after we got off the air, of course, on Friday. So here's a little bit of it. Go ahead.
Let's start with the debate. You and your team have said you had a bad night, but your friend Nancy Pelosi actually framed the question that I think is on the minds of millions of Americans. Was this a bad episode or the sign of a more serious condition?
It's a bad episode. No indication of any serious condition. I was exhausted. I didn't listen to my instincts in terms of preparing, and I had a bad night.
You know, you say you were exhausted, and I know you've said that before as well, but you came, and you did have a tough month, but you came home from Europe about 11 or 12 days before the debate, spent 6 days in Camp David. Why wasn't that enough rest time, enough recovery time?
Because I was sick. I was feeling terrible. Matter of fact, the docs with me, I asked if they did a COVID test because they were trying to figure out what was wrong. They did a test to see whether or not I had some infection, a virus. I didn't. They just had a really bad cold.
And did you ever watch the debate afterwards?
I don't think I did, no.
Well, what I want to get at is, what were your experiences?
By the way,
as you were
I'd
going
stop there
through
for a
the
second. I thought that was the first. Look, his halting manner or the fact that he doesn't speak I think he speaks like Biden speaks. Has he slowed a little bit? Yeah, yeah. But I'm not jumping all over the way he's speaking right now in this interview. But I will jump all over this. Did you watch any of the debate? Did you go back and watch any of it? Simple yes or no question. Did you or didn't you? And he didn't answer in a simple yes or no way. First of all,
I did.
the only acceptable answer is yes, I did. Yes, I did, and I see why people might be concerned. But the reality is you were seeing someone who was dealing with a schedule that had just crescendoed on me, or it was a wave that crashed over me. Play the answer to the question again, Tony, and then I won't interrupt again.
I don't think I did, no.
Well, what I want to get at is what were you experiencing as you were going through the debate? Did you know how badly it was going?
Yeah, look, the whole way I prepared, nobody's fault, mine. Nobody's fault but mine. I prepared what I usually would do, sitting down, as I did come back with foreign leaders or the National Security Council, for explicit detail. And I realized about partway through that, I get quoted, the New York Times had me down at 10 points before the debate, 9 now, or whatever the hell it is. The fact of the matter is that what I looked at is that he also lied 28 times. The way the debate...
Yeah. So he's, I think, less than clear might be I was going to say cogent. I think he's cogent-ish, but I think his interpretation is, open to further interpretation. And he's basically saying, I didn't prep for, this is, again, and you got to do this with Donald Trump too, just to be fair, because Donald Trump says a lot of crap and you go, well, I think what he means is, with Biden, he's essentially saying, I prepared a lot of specifics and this guy came at me with a fire hose of lies. That's essentially what he's saying. And I wish he'd said it that way. But, he is what he is. And what was the other? I had so then there's this morning. So that was Friday. And then over the weekend, you get more Democrats privately saying, we're not sure. We think the Kamala Harris scenario makes the most sense. And you have, as I've suggested, this waterfall of op-ed. It was incredible. If I was being paid by the op-ed I read about Biden and how you need to step out, I'd never have to work again. There were so many of them, both in Substack and New York Times, Washington Post, Chronicle, whatever it might be, the Merc. Let's look. You had the right thing. Let's look at this morning on Morning Joe, I guess is the show.
How would you feel after you lost? And you said, well, as long as I did the best I could do, that's the most important thing. That's caused Democrats concern who believe that losing is not an option. What would you say to those who are concerned by that answer?
It's not an option, and I've not lost. I haven't lost. I beat him last time. I'll beat him this time. And this is a guy who, look, we talk about debates. Look at his performance at debates. He lied over, Trump has 50 lies. Look, this is a guy who says 10% of the universe. I want to get into it. He's just a liar. And he hadn't done a damn thing since the debate. He's been riding around in a golf cart for 10 days or down in Mar-a-Lago talking with his wealthy friends. I'm not running because of these guys, Joe. I'm running because, and you know me well enough to know this from the very beginning, I ran because I never bought on in the trickle-down economic theory. I never bought into the notion that we have to walk away from the rest of the world and cave to Putin or anybody else. I've never believed any of that. And I'm confident that's where the American people are. So what I did was I went out and I wanted to make sure that there wasn't any slippage at all. And with the average voter, I don't care what the millionaires think. And by the way, 97% of all the people who contribute to us people make it under 200, contribute under $200. I think we have the largest contingent ever in history. I'm not positive of that, but I think that's true. And so I want their support, but that's not the reason I'm running. I'm not running about what they think and what they care about. And by the way, you don't see a whole hell of a lot of them flocking to Trump.
You don't see a whole lot of CEOs flocking to Trump. You don't see any. You see the major economists out there talking about what I have been able to do. I don't hear anybody talking about his economic plan likely to bring America around and keep America first. And
this is
way,
you can stop there, Tony. This is actually really good what he's doing right now, but it's a shame that he just didn't do it on stage. In fact, all leading economists, and there's a pretty long list of them, suggest that Trump policies, the mass deportation, the Chinese tariffs, just for starters, will have an insanely inflationary effect. So the economy will revisit inflation in an even bigger way. Hey, he sounded good, sounded defiant, sounded like he was trying to get to the issues. And
sounded like a fighter, right?
You know, yeah. And the thing that he was doing is what I was mentioning to Gary Dietrich, which he's kind of playing the media and big politics, that is to say big donors. He's trying to play against them now. I know they want me to do this. I know they're writing these op-ed pieces. I know they're saying I should drop out. But you, the American people, I've been your advocate. We've done amazing things for 3.5 years, and we're going to keep doing them. That's what he's saying. And, you know, let's see. Biden was trying too hard to be honest about watching himself on the debate, says PT. His answer was he did not watch, but he feared someone may have played a snippet in his presence, though he wasn't watching. Oh, that could be. You're saying if there's then video of him watching the debate, it makes him look bad after the fact. God, imagine, but maybe. I mean, it's not completely unreasonable. So that's the Joe Biden that was on this morning, again, following a weekend of campaigning. Did I send you a third video, Tony? What was that? Oh, yeah, this relates to the NATO summit, I think. We'll play a little bit of this and we'll see. Go ahead.
Marked the 75th anniversary of the collective defense treaty known as NATO, at a time when the president is seeking to unite both the alliance and his party here at home. The president touting his record with NATO in an exclusive interview with MSNBC this morning.
The rest of the world is looking, our allies are looking for U.S. leadership. Who else do you think could step in here and do this? I expanded NATO. I solidified NATO.
Joining us now, Democratic Congressman Gregory Meeks from New York. He is the ranking member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Congressman, it's always a pleasure to see you. I thank you so much for your time. What's your reaction to what we heard from the president this morning?
I think the president told the truth. History is going to reflect this president is doing a tremendous job. NATO now is stronger than ever as a result of the efforts of this president. You now have, as opposed to NATO being weak, which Putin had counted on, they're more united than they've ever been before. And we have 2 new members in Finland and Sweden. So the president has been a unifier. And as we look at the 75th anniversary of NATO, NATO is more important now than ever, unlike the viewpoints of the challenger to the president, who basically, when he was president, said NATO may have outworn its usefulness, and who has also said Russia can do whatever they want to some of our NATO allies. No, Russia is trying to wait out till November, hoping that the other guy can get elected, and that Biden continuing to unite the United States, our EU, our NATO allies, as well as, because what I think is unprecedented, again, led by this president, we have our Indo-Pacific partners also working with NATO and talking about some of the other challenges we have around the world. So it's not the United States alone or America alone, America only. It's us with our democratic allies.
There you go. I like that. I think it does frame how important the NATO alliance is. It also frames how delicate international politics is. It doesn't do well with a reckless chief executive.
No.
So that's why I think Blinken and others in the State Department, as you know, the State Department was really cored out under Donald Trump, and they don't want the State Department to have many people on board. They're really about getting rid of the U.S. State Department. They want to get rid of the administrative state, but when you run into problems abroad, Ukraine, Russia, Gaza, et cetera, you need people who are in the world of diplomacy. That's how stuff gets done. So this idea that you can, strap on your nukes and talk tough, which is what Trump's game is, that doesn't work effectively in all of these different theaters. And the idea somehow that you'll roll over and let despotic leaders like Kim rub your belly and get a photo op with you, that doesn't work either. Not to mention, I'm giving Trump credit for actually trying to do something in the world of diplomacy, when I think what is actually going on with Donald Trump is he's trying to secure additional construction projects for Trump projects worldwide. That's what he cares about with the Russians. I mean, it's likely in that conversation in which he got rid of all White House and government people during the Putin conversation, only the translator remained. It's likely some of those conversations had to do with commercial endeavors that Trump wanted. Now, you can say, oh, Mark, you're jumping to go, well, you tell me. Why do you get rid of everybody else? Why would you possibly get rid of all of these people who are there to protect you? This is from Sam, says Biden will lose. Of course, lose is L-O-S-E, and I'll give you a pro tip, Sam.
Loose.
It is easy to misspell it. Lose is when you lose the second O, you see. There you go. That's a good way to remember it. Mark, how come they can elect and support Reagan? When first elected, he already had senility, and no one said a peep about it. By the time he was in the second term, he had full-blown dementia again. That, thank you, Karen, is a really good point. And I think it speaks to the way the media environment has changed. Reagan was a very carefully managed person in terms of appearances. And so I think, yeah, you're right. No one said anything is exactly right,
We didn't
Karen.
know. We had no idea. Until, afterward. And then there was all this talk about, Nancy Reagan was trying to protect him. And, in the waning days of his office, he didn't really have it together. The difference now is we saw him at the debate. And so now we think we know.
Right. That's exactly right. I mean, it was just, the worst. Joe, says Luis, big shout out to everybody who sent us super stickers and super chats. Joe is like your 80-year-old grandfather who can no longer safely operate a car, but half the family's in denial and insists keeping him on the road. Maybe I don't really like these, 80-year-old grandfather who can no longer safely operate a car analogies, as I was kind of going through in the first, but what you're talking about is the denial. I get it. The denial part, it's not just denial. They can see what's happening, but they're talking about the viability at this stage of changing horses in midstream. So that's what they're evaluating. So I'm leaving the Biden defiance out, which is a big thing, but I'm leaving it out for now. So when you talk about grandfather and the keys, I get what you're talking in terms of the denial, the pushback, like, let grandpa drive, it's going to be, blah, blah, blah. But I feel it breaks down because the actual job of grandpa isn't to drive, as I was telling you in the first hour. It's to put together a coalition of good administrators and government employees who are honest and who have a strategy for the future. And I think Biden does that well. I don't know if it's Biden or somebody else and there's a puppeteer there. I don't know. But I know that Trump doesn't do it well. So there you have it. Go ahead, Kim.
There's the difference between, President Biden and Democrats looking at his performance in the debate and going, right? And then we've seen video of Trump talking about sharks and electricity and weird boats and washing machines and his mind going off on these weird tangents, which would indicate to me there's some type of maybe acuity mental issue as well. But the difference is, in this case, the Republicans talk about circle the wagons. They'd lift him up on a pedestal. It's like they ignore that altogether, but we don't.
Right. It's just clearly the Democrats are barely a coalition party to begin with all of the different parts of the party. It's the big tent,
Yeah.
So it's an effort just to keep the party together in the best of times.
Right.
When you enter something like this. You enter a period during which now everybody's got an opinion, and we ought to have an open convention, and it's like, it feels as though, wow, this could be a huge mess. How is Biden going to win Michigan, asks Jan. The Arab voters are against him now. Yeah, here's the fact about that. The alternative, once again, to Arab voters is, I would think, scary. I mean, okay, you don't like the Wicked Witch of the North. Great. Guess who just showed up? The Wicked Witch of the West. That's who you want to vote for? So I want to, if you're voting Middle East and you're in the camp of the Arab street, it seems to me you've got no choice. You've got to go Joe Biden. At least he's ready to take a meeting on many of these things that are associated with Palestinian leadership, et cetera. Trump is not. Trump's the guy who moved the embassy to Jerusalem. So I don't see it. What else? This is from some guy. The economy's in ruins. What is he talking about? Completely out of touch with the reality. No, Jay, sorry, you're completely out of touch. The economy's not in ruins. It's actually doing well. Here it is. Thank you, Will. Record high stock market, lowest unemployment in 50 years, and lowest inflation in the world. So
we just had an increase.
Yeah, right.
We just had a jobs report showing that we added more jobs than we thought we would.
Yeah.
Right?
So, I mean, sorry, Jay. I mean, I know that's the talking point, maybe. Things are so bad. Oh, my God, the economy. But that's just not. Now, you could say it feels as though I'm not benefiting to that from that yet. But you can not say that the economy is in shambles, and you just can't say it. You can say it, but it's now you join the, pull the facts out of my ass club, which is really beginning to be more prominent in this country. I also had
It's because people are looking at grocery store prices, and they're still paying a lot more than they were. And so, maybe people think that the grocery store prices and the gas prices are the only indicators of a good economy, and those are not true. That's not true.
Right. And the gas prices are just, you can only do so much. I welcomed, somebody mentioned to me, thank you, Marilyn. Marilyn's one of our Patreon supporters, and she said that there's a lot of old information on the page. So we should spruce up the picture and the post just to let everybody know that we're still there on Patreon and PayPal. Thank you, Marilyn, for that. Mm-hmm. It's been kind of a busy period, but you're absolutely right. We should spruce it up. And I'm wondering if that's going to happen this week. And the only way to know is to ask Mr. Predicto.
Without hesitation, yes.
Yeah, okay, there you go.
Nice.
Right, okay, good.
I have a quick story to tell you before you move forward with the show.
Excuse me, Kim. Mr. Predicto, one question, and then you're done. No, Mr. Predicto. Excuse me, Kim.
It cannot be determined at this time.
Okay, all right. I'm sorry. Mr. Predicto is really padding his part. All right.
Yeah, he really is.
Go ahead.
I saw this story that I thought was of interest. It just turned up on CNN, and they're talking about how a Parkinson's specialist met with the president's physician at the White House earlier this year. There's no indication as to what they talked about or what the meeting pertained to, but that's the latest out of the White House news at this time.
Well, I'm no Mr. Predicto, but I think that probably talked about Parkinson's is what I would guess. Yeah, I really, I don't think the fact that the guy was a Parkinson's specialist was just like an added thing. Like he was actually there for something else, right? I think he was probably there to discuss that. So, hey, Ron Owens had Parkinson's, right?
Absolutely.
Has Parkinson's, and he was crushing as a talk show host
for years.
Okay?
With it, absolutely,
with Parkinson's.
Yeah.
So that I'm not trying to be fair here. That's all. All right, smash the like button. What are we doing, Tony? Now I feel like can I get a turbo news, 5 minutes of news, and then bring on Courtney with True Crime Corner?
That works for me. Does it work for you,
Kim, are you cool with that?
Sure, why not?
Oh, you don't sound very excited about it.
No, good. Bring it. Bring it, baby.
I don't know. It didn't sound excited when I said that. Okay. All right. Anyway. All right. Smash the like button. Mark Thompson Show.
Hey, which one do you use? Mark Thompson?
Who's Mark Thompson?
The Mark Thompson Show.
On the Mark Thompson Show, I'm Kim McAllister, and let's talk about 2 people dead and millions left without power because of Tropical Storm Beryl as it slams into Texas.
Well, Texas? Is that the rest of that? Did she freeze up or did I freeze up?
That's probably me. I'm having trouble.
Okay, go ahead.
Beryl about 55 miles northwest of Houston, top wind 60 miles per hour as it moves further inland. Again, as just mentioned, there's a new report saying an expert on Parkinson's disease visited the White House 8 times over an 8-month period. The New York Times, citing visitor logs, reports neurologist Dr. Kevin Kennard visited the White House July of 2023 through March of this year and met with President Biden's physician at least once. The report comes as President Biden faces questions over his age, his mental fitness, as his ability to serve another 4 years as president if reelected. The White House said the president is not being treated for that disease. Boeing has agreed to plead guilty to criminal fraud over 2 deadly 737 MAX airplane crashes, one from 2018, the other 2019. The Justice Department saying the aircraft maker violated a settlement that protected the company from prosecution. And again, as mentioned, California's largest wildfire is still raging in Santa Barbara County. The lake fire is now at more than 20,000 acres, only 8% contained. Areas around Zaca Lake are under evacuation orders. Several wineries are also threatened. Now, when you threaten the wineries, that's where I have a really big problem. Now, the flames are burning less than a mile from Neverland Ranch, the longtime home of late pop star Michael Jackson as well. Less than a mile. This story from Mark, singles action at Wimbledon continues as round 4 rolls on. On the men's side, American Taylor Fritz defeated 4-seed Alexander Zverev, while 4-time champion Novak Djokovic is facing off against 15-seed Holger Rune. On the women's side, American Danielle Collins eliminated after losing in straight sets. So that's how it looks at Wimbledon.
Yeah, that's kind of an upset for the Americans, so that's pretty great.
Yeah.
Knocking off a top seed. I think Fritz was 12th seed, so 12 beats 4. Oh, did I lose Kim?
No, I'm
She
here.
was just so blown away by I didn't want to get into a big tennis thing, but yeah, that's great.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
it.
really, yeah.
Party over.
Huh?
The Mark Thompson Show.
Oh, it really is it? Okay.
Had to do a
The
quick
Mark
one.
Thompson Show.
Oh, girl, baby, girl. Don't even play.
What up, everybody? Girl, baby, girl, don't even come round to here with that. That's all I got to say. Also want to take a quick shout out to a couple of new Patreon subscribers, welcoming Tammy to our Patreon community. And I want to say every little bit counts, and I
Big
appreciate
shout out.
anybody for any amount. The Patreon hot link is right under every video that we post, so you can check it out and, be part of the community. Charles Floyd, he is a $10
Big
a
shout
month
Nice.
subscriber. Thank
Did
you.
you say that the last one was Tanny as the name?
Tammy.
Oh, Tammy. Okay.
Tammy. Tammy, Tam. Yeah, appreciate that. And Jessica, now a monthly
Big
member as
shout out.
well. So very excited. And I will update the Patreon site. Also wanted to mention Barbara, who I might have mentioned before, but I think it was during the time that my dad died, so I wasn't here. And Barbara is a new Patreon member
Big
as
shout
well.
out.
Big shout out. I'm not going to cry.
I'm not gonna cry.
But pretty great. And Roxanne is the other person I want.
Big shout out.
So really, really cool. Thank you, you Patreoners. You're awesome. That's a great way to support the show. And as I say, there's a hot link under every video for you to support, check it out, and be part of things. I look forward to a visit with my darling other half because she has an interest in something that doesn't necessarily capture me typically, but she's now got me kind of interested. It's true crime, but first a welcome for Courtney, everybody. Yeah. Hello.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hi.
We had a
for
very
having me.
good weekend, better than last weekend. Last weekend,
The bar
Courtney
was low.
Courtney was with me in the hospital because
Yeah.
I was in the hospital on Saturday of last week.
Yeah, that was not good. I mean, it was a night, like, you know, did you tell them about your solace?
Oh, I did, and
Yeah,
I wouldn't
yeah.
mention the name, but
Oh.
yeah, I don't think unless they want to
Sponsor.
Yeah, do you want to just turn that? This is like that, and then you turn that to.
Okay, there, like that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
An unnamed
went-
concierge ER.
Yeah, we went to a concierge ER because I was heaving my guts out, and we needed to get someplace fast. And I didn't even know it existed, but the doctor said, "Hey, if you don't want to wait, next to a knife victim and then behind 3 COVID people, you may want this." And I looked at her and I said, "Oh my God!" First of all, the room is spinning, and I've got all that nausea and all this stuff, and it had been a brutal 3 days, 103 fever that wouldn't go away.
It was
So
awful.
I just said, let's just do it. Let's just go to the place. So we spend all this money. It's crazy. But man, you get to a doctor in about 2 minutes. It was unreal.
It was unreal.
Yeah.
It actually inspired my true crime story that
Oh,
we're going
did
to
it?
do. Yeah,
Oh.
because I wasn't on last Monday. And so I did this over last weekend and part of this weekend. Yeah.
Well, I will not delay any further then.
Mm-hmm.
It is.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Kim, did you have something for? No? Okay. This is True Crime Corner.
Let's pay a visit to Mark's True Crime Corner.
This is not a good neighborhood. I'm scared.
Now, here's your host, Mark Thompson.
And she is the one with the abiding interest in the world of true crime. My other half is Courtney, everyone.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, as I mentioned, this crime story, these murders, were inspired by what happened last weekend.
But
Not
what happened
this
to me?
recent weekend. Yeah, what happened to you? Because initially, with 103 fever, we thought it was COVID. So
That's
you
right.
started to take Tylenol.
Right.
Because that's what you do when you have COVID.
We took multiple COVID tests, by the way.
Multiple COVID
We had
tests.
6 in total, 4 in the house and 2 at the doctor's
I
office.
actually just sent you a post from Instagram where a doctor talks about how the new strain of COVID gives you symptoms like having food poisoning.
Oh my God.
Right?
Which is
But you
really
took
what we,
like 6 COVID tests. It
Yeah.
wasn't COVID.
It wasn't COVID.
Yeah, it's kind of
They
crazy.
think it was a bacteria in the gut and in another organ. That's what they're looking
Yeah.
at now. But anyway.
But the good news is we're back to worrying about finger and feet and all the other things that are a problem.
Yeah. Anyway, so so in this case, the Tylenol is what made you think of
The Tylenol murders
the
from
Tylenol
1982.
murders. And
Yeah.
it was near Chicago. Is that where that was?
It was in Chicago, yeah. So the Tylenol murders took place between end of September and early October in 1982 in Chicago. And so 7 people were killed through Tylenol capsules that had been replaced with potassium cyanide. And so the Tylenol pills that had been replaced were those of Tylenol extra strength. So if you're watching, you can see the 1982 video of the Tylenol packaging from then, and it was the extra strength Tylenol. Now there were stores in various locations in and around Chicago where these pills had been tampered with. And so you can see, if you're watching, a map of all of the tampered Tylenol placements.
Wow, it's extraordinary.
Yeah, it is extraordinary. And the cyanide would eventually eat through the capsule, right? Because it was so toxic. And there was 3 times the amount. I thought more, but I read 3 times the amount of what would be required to kill somebody within these Tylenol capsules. So it had a very short shelf life. So in that, they knew that the person who was doing this, who was tampering with these Tylenol capsules, had to be in and around Chicago. And basically what they thought was that they were buying the Tylenol, taking them, replacing the capsules that were filled with the acetaminophen with the potassium cyanide. The potassium cyanide does not taste like anything, but it smells like almond. But I'll get into that in a little bit. And that was a key component to figuring out that it was potassium cyanide that was in these capsules. So the capsules are placed all over the city. If you go to the next slide, Tony, I think it shows these are the people who were killed by taking those capsules.
Such young people.
Such young people. And so if we go to the first one, initially 3 people die, and the first deaths are reported. So 2 of the deaths come from a family, the Janus family, and that is Adam and his brother Stanley. And Adam, I believe, is a mail carrier, and I don't remember what Stanley did. But in fact, they take the extra strength Tylenol from the same bottle, and they both die. Adam passes away first. He starts to convulse, and they take Adam to the hospital. And then Stanley and his wife, Teresa, who are both here in this photo. Teresa, I believe, is the bride in this photo. They take the capsules after Adam, and they both die. So 3 members of the same family die from one bottle.
So
of
Adam,
the extra
just to,
Tylenol.
again, it's so surprising to be reminded, Adam 27, Stanley 25, and Teresa 19.
Yeah, exactly. It's awful. It's just awful. If you go to the next slide, the actual very first victim was Marianne Kellerman. She was 12, and she was complaining about not feeling well. She had a headache and a stomach ache, and so her parents gave her the extra strength Tylenol, told her not to go to school. Immediately after they gave it to her, they heard her fall, and so they took her to the hospital where she died. So these are the 3 first deaths of the Tylenol. It was actually a nurse that was investigating the Janus brothers and Teresa's death that figured out it was potassium cyanide. So she goes to the house to look at the scene of the crime or the deaths, and figures out that there's an open bottle of Tylenol. There's exactly 6 tablets or 6 capsules missing. And when she smells the Tylenol, it smells like that almond. So she's the one that flags that the Tylenol was in fact the culprit of these murders.
She was a nurse.
She was a nurse.
Wow, great.
Working for the county health.
Great, good, yeah.
So if you go to the next slide, it'll show you there's 2 more deaths. So again, you saw how dispersed these Tylenol packages were. So 2 more deaths were Mary Rayner and Molly McFarland. Now Mary, she was a mother of 4. She had actually just had her 4th child, I think in the month or 2 before this happened. And so they both take Tylenol, extra strength. They both have headaches. They're not feeling well. At the time that this happened, Tylenol had a 37% market share for over-the-counter pain reliever. I mean, it was really, really well known and taken and trusted. Johnson & Johnson was, in fact, the manufacturer. It's interesting because I was listening to stories covering this murder, this true crime. A lot of the people covering it were having to explain to Gen Z what Tylenol was. I mean, do people not take Tylenol any longer?
I mean, Tylenol,
like
I hear it more and more talked about,
Yeah.
as particularly as opioids have sort of been revealed as this incredibly addictive thing. Increasingly, ibuprofen and Tylenol are proven to be as effective oftentimes in terms of pain relief. And of course, that's not to mention CBDs and all the other things that people can do. But Tylenol, hey man, it was a go-to thing back in when was this, the 80s?
1982, yeah. So now there are, 5 people who have passed. They start to take Tylenol off of all of the shelves. So the mayor of Chicago has a press conference. They start to take Tylenol off the shelves. You can see there's another visual if you go back, Tony. Yep. So this is obviously from 1982. Yeah. You can tell by the haircut that they start to take Tylenol off of all the shelves.
Somebody working there at the store is literally taking the Tylenol off the shelves.
Now, the first Tylenol is taken on September 29th. So the first deaths happen on September 29th. So by October 1st, Tylenol's taken off all the shelves in Chicago, and then just a few days later, this reaches nationwide hysteria, of course, because people don't know how many of these Tylenol capsules have been tampered with. So there's a nationwide removal of the Tylenol. So if you keep going, Tony. Yeah, they find that the Tylenol's been tampered with. If you keep going, this is the health department in Chicago testing all of the Tylenol. Again, as I mentioned, it had a very short shelf life because the cyanide would eat through the capsules. So really, this all had to happen the day before that people took and bought and took this Tylenol.
So this is really interesting. And by the way, this is the triumph of, I know everybody, I hate government, and I can't wait till Donald Trump gets in there and dismantles the entire government, and oh my God, the administrative state. Go back one. That's the USDA you're talking about. Okay, already overwhelmed the USDA, all right? But it's the USDA that made the final determination and got the word out. So, and then the Chicago Health Department, they do the tests. Those are government agencies. So everybody who wants to privatize everything, and I mean, this is part of a broader conversation. I don't mean to make it political, but I'm just suggesting at critical moments, oftentimes in many of these narratives, certainly like this is a public health risk of immense proportion. They don't know what's going on. People are dropping like flies. You need a big government agency to handle it. And that's what the USDA did, and that's what the Chicago Health Department did. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, exactly. So by October 1st, 2nd, 3rd, Tylenol is off all the shelves in Chicago. And Tylenol doesn't know how to respond. At first, they're a little hesitant to take all of the Tylenol off of the shelves because they don't believe that it's a bigger issue than these kind of sporadic bottles.
They think it's isolated and they don't want to take it up. But back then there was no seal on the bottle, was there?
But there was no seal on the bottle. And it's $100 million back then to take all of this product off the shelves. But they do. And Tylenol's response to this horrible incident, this horrible situation, actually is really revered in public relations circles because they did sort of textbook what you're supposed to do. So they take the Tylenol down, they inform all medical institutions and doctors all over the country about this issue. They then take it down throughout the country. They stop advertising, they stop selling, and they start to work on a tamper-resistant triple sealed Tylenol bottle.
So they take the hit, they go with it, they understand it, they acknowledge it. And then you're saying, and then it becomes, let me show you, the public, how we're going to make this tamper-proof.
Yes, and they're supporting the families as well. So they go to safer packaging. So you can see here, this is the 3-level triple sealed new Tylenol bottles. By December, most brands that had these non-sealed bottles were starting to seal them in the same way. And by February, I believe it was required throughout the country that if you had some kind of something that could be consumed by the public, that it would have to have a tamper-resistant seal. This actually started, the Tylenol murders started this big scare around Halloween candy because it happened at the beginning of October. And so there were a lot of copycats that tried to do things to products that people were consuming. And there was a huge scare around Halloween that year of kids eating candy that had been tampered with. Yeah.
Let me get to the sleuthing part of this because they then, I think you've described it quite well, they owned the situation, Tylenol did, then they made these corrections, they announced them, there's that packaging and the securing of the medicine that's in there, that acetaminophen, that Tylenol, was then adopted by other companies. But what about the sleuthing required to figure out who actually perpetrated this to begin with? Was there a trail of any kind they focused on?
I'm glad you asked, Mark. Yes, there was. So there were, at the beginning, there were 20,000 suspects, which is a lot. Wow. They knew the suspect had to be in and around Chicago, as I mentioned, because of the shelf life. And someone had sent a note to Johnson & Johnson saying that they, in fact, had tampered with the bottles and blackmailing them for $1 million to stop doing that. And the person who sent that, if you go down, Tony, his name was James Lewis. He becomes the prime suspect. They actually took DNA from the Unabomber because the Unabomber lived in and around Chicago at the time, and so
this might have been like just a side hustle,
or he was around it. Yeah, so it was like he was in fact potentially a suspect in this case. But James Lewis was the prime suspect, and so James Lewis sends this letter. He sends it to Johnson & Johnson, and he wants $1 million to stop the cyanide-induced murders. He gets arrested. But they don't have enough evidence to prove that he did it. He was an amateur chemist. He did have like half a dozen unregistered guns at his house, and he had a booklet that talked about cyanide,
God.
wherein his DNA was found on those pages. And eventually the Department of Justice says, like, he is the guy that did this. And that's not until 2010. He does go to jail for blackmailing Johnson & Johnson, but he was never formally charged with this crime. And in fact, no one ever was. So he died actually last year, July 9th. It was actually July 9th that he died. So tomorrow will be a year since when he passed. He said that he wrote the letter to indict his wife's business at the time because he didn't like his wife's employer. Now, what's interesting, there's two interesting things about this. The first being because of the postmark on the letter, he had to have written the letter before this crime was announced, meaning he had to have known that this was happening based on the postmarking of this letter. So that, in fact, does really point to him being the person who perpetrated this crime. However, they did take James Lewis's DNA and his wife's, and neither of them, their DNA was on any of the bottles. So there's not DNA evidence to connect them to the crime. But,
wow. But the only powerful circumstantial evidence that you just detailed points to James Lewis, or is there anybody else who could have that was like a person of interest, or
there were other people of interest, but not like him.
They didn't reach the threshold of evidence that this guy.
He sent a letter before it was public about the crime that was about to happen. He was an amateur chemist. He had a book about cyanide in his home.
Cyanide for dummies.
It's really, really hard to make the sort of point that you weren't involved in this.
He died a natural death, meaning he wasn't in prison when he died.
No, he died in Massachusetts. He was living in Cambridge, Massachusetts. That's him on the right, just before his death. And tomorrow will in fact be a year since he died.
Wow.
Yeah. So
really a good story.
It remains unsolved. Now, I think they reopened the case in 2009, and so they still are looking for the person who did this. But if it was James Lewis, he has passed. So.
Wow. Very impressive, Courtney. Nice job.
Really interesting story.
The Tylenol murders. It was really something that.
And there were actually 7 victims. So there were the 5 that I mentioned, and then there were 2 more victims who took the Tylenol, but then died 2 days or a day or 2 later. So they died closer into the beginning of October versus the end of September. So
really. It was a real piece of the culture at that time, and it really did force changes, good changes in packaging.
It was the first domestic terrorist event, or not the first, but it was one of the widely known domestic terrorist events.
There it is. Teresa Janis and Paula Prince die as the result of taking cyanide-laced Tylenol. They both took and had taken the pain reliever on September 29th. All happened in 1982.
1982.
Yeah. That is True Crime Corner for today.
True Crime Corner, only on the Mark Thompson Show.
Yeah. People are angry, and of course, the more they get angry, Courtney, and the more they get angry on your behalf, the more I dig in like Broadway Joe Biden.
Why are they angry?
Yeah, how dare you?
Why?
I don't know. I always catch it at the beginning. It's some,
are they angry about Biden, or are they angry about the story I just did?
They always feel, I think it's his teacher, Lori, she's never happy. Everything's too long, or it's, why don't you do this more? Why don't you do that more? This isn't, And yet I really like her, which is why her comments sear me to the bone. But
it is an it is an ever-present thing in our lives.
Any reader of murder mystery knows that the almond smell indicates cyanide, says the teacher, Lori. That kind of comment I like.
There was one bottle of cyanide that was purchased by a judge's wife. She smelled it. She thought it smelled weird, did not take it. So there was one story of that was published. But I think most of these people who took it weren't aware of the almond smell. But
here's Teacher Lori. Yeah. OMG with like 4 exclamation points.
See, thank you, Teacher Lori.
And then
I'm behind
a bunch
Teacher
of red,
Lori.
I don't know what that is, and then a bunch of other emojis. I don't know what those are. Will you call it Courtney's True Crime Corner already?
There's also an alliteration, a little bit to that, too.
Sure.
So,
Courtney's Crime Corner, Yeah,
the Courtney's, you'd have to go Courtney's Crime Corner. Yeah, Mars agrees. Lori agreed.
Thank you.
Courtney's True Crime Corner is earned. It certainly is. Well, I'm dug in like Joe Biden. When Joe Biden decides to step back, then maybe I'll step back. I don't count on anybody on this show. What is it, Tony?
Well, technically, True Crime Corner was the alternative name because originally it had alliteration because it was Mark's Murder Mystery Monday.
That's exactly. Tony is right.
Thanks, Tony.
Who gave Tony? Yeah, who put Tony's microphone on?
So we just
we found that putting certain words in titles didn't help us in monetization, so that's what
because we would essentially be demonetized every month.
Yes, immediately.
Right? Wait, they don't like murder?
No,
they don't. Surprisingly.
Jeez.
So it's a pretty big sacrifice we're making already, and now they want me to.
This is the story of my life.
To change the
second fiddle.
Anyway, Meredith gives you a little
it's a
love,
nice
which
place
is cool.
that I live. Just
love this
below
rendition
Mark
today,
Thompson.
Courtney.
Yeah.
Call it. Well, Michael, you can call it Courtney's True Crime Corner.
Thank you. Look at this.
Yeah.
See, thank you.
I blame Tony, says Trevor.
Thanks, Tony.
Now another reason to hope Biden steps aside.
It reminds me, Courtney, that story of wasn't there some type of eye drop tampering in the early 90s? It was like on the heels of the Tylenol case, and people were using it, and if someone had messed with it, and they were going blind in one eye or both. I don't know if you remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, absolutely. No, definitely. Mm-hmm. It's like it's so scary. And it's crazy that no one was thinking about this.
Right.
And then it took people dying and someone, kind of exploiting a vulnerability to do this. I actually heard something really interesting, which was that the cotton balls that are in the containers that we buy, they were needed originally to help with shipping issues with the product.
Oh, that's interesting.
But we have become so used to seeing the cotton in the bottles that despite our not needing it, because when they made the actual caplets, not the capsules, the hardened caplets, they didn't have as much of an issue of the product being destroyed in shipping. But because we were so used to the cotton, it continues to be put into the bottles.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a great fact.
Yeah.
I really support that fact.
Yeah, it's the cotton lobbyers.
Really
Can't let go of that insert.
Well, Courtney, I'll see you at an emergency room around here. Smash the like
button.
I can
only hope.
With your iron rod.
Yeah. Courtney, everybody. Thanks, Courtney.
Thank you for having me. Hi, Kim. Hi, Tony.
All
Bye.
Right.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Courtney's getting a little too familiar around here. Kind of getting super comfortable.
She's just familiar enough. This is perfect.
Okay. Anyway, it's great to have her in. That was really interesting. And I remember the Tylenol murders, as I'm sure most of you did too, but I couldn't remember all the specifics.
Oh, girl, baby, girl.
Yeah, don't even play. How about some, on the way out, some comments? Some of these I responded to already. Trump is saying batshit crazy stuff, and they're not giving him and his lunacy the proper attention, says John Slade. I mean, I think that's true. And that's kind of what I was saying before, that the media oxygen is being taken by this question of Biden's mental acuity, and maybe appropriately so on some level. But I do feel it's getting into the email, what about her email category, like where all the
focus
media talks about is the Clinton emails / the Biden mental acuity. So
on the other hand, I can't tell you how many times the media, and personally me, have been criticized for continuing to talk about Trump. So what is it? Do you not want me to mention Trump? Are you tired of that? Do you think any attention to Trump is bad? Or, like the comment just said, we're not focusing enough on his BS crazy. Like, what is it? Either you want to be, told about the craziest thing he's done today, or you don't want to hear about it. Damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Tesla says Trump is in between convictions, so he may be at his strongest. It's true. And his sentencing has all been, you realize that, really he is above the law. It's a scary time in America.
Yep.
Biden is aging right before our eyes, and it looks very bad, says Phineas.
Yep.
I'm aging before your eyes, but it looks better, huh? Yeah, I know. I can't affect it either. But I know I'm getting older, but geez, every day is just, what can I say? Right on. Thank you, Phineas. On Carell's show, says the lady Beatrice, he discussed worst-case scenarios for Trump winning under the immunity ruling. And it proves an important point. Darth Vader cannot win for democracy's sake. He mustn't. Lady Beatrice for the $10 super chat on that. Yeah, I mean, thank you for that.
Big shout out,
Lady Beatrice. The plan is real. This 2025 plan is real. And the idea somehow that, it's over the top, it's a scary... it comes from the Heritage Foundation. The Democrats didn't think it up. These aren't bullet points that Democrats have laid out. These are in the document. The Heritage Foundation, this conservative think tank, and I'll play you tomorrow a piece of video from the guy who runs the Heritage Foundation. So I don't want to hear how it's so fantastical it would never happen. It's very much going to happen. I've given you the routine. Trump comes down at 11 a.m., his bathrobe, having just watched Fox and Friends, and he's maybe talked to Sean Hannity or somebody else on TV. Maybe he does a little bit of conversation with his staff. He doesn't read any briefing materials, as you know. He then goes and he plays golf. So the business of government and the business of pursuing strategies to change America, that goes on without him. That's those administrators that we talk about. That when I think it was Randy in the first hour, so I'm not hiring an administrator. I'm hiring an administration. He said, I'm hiring a chief executive. Well, if you're not worried about who the administration is, then you're not worrying about a very important part of an administration, particularly when the chief executive is essentially MIA. I mean, we know he's not really M. We know he's not missing. He's over on the golf course. But Steve Bannon, Stephen Miller, these are people who will then forge policy for the United States. And all those conservative think tank occupants from the Heritage Foundation, they're going to have a big hand in it too. Leonard Leo for the Federalist Society. He'll have another crack at so much of the judiciary and potentially the Supreme Court. So you begin to see the administration has nothing to do with Trump. Again, Trump's golfing and showing up for photo ops. But the people who are going to be in there in his administration, that is the future of America. And they see a dismantling of what they call the administrative state. I've already told you they'll core out the State Department, but they started to do it under Trump. And you end up with essentially a hobbled government. All the regulatory agencies look as though they're being dismantled by the Supreme Court. You have Congress that can't do anything because of the logjam that is partisanship. And you have the courts then essentially forging policy. So it'll be executive orders and the courts backing up executive orders. That will begin to really change America. The one thing you'll be able to get through is probably the tax cuts that Donald Trump wants. And no one asks the question, who's going to pay for the tax cuts? How do you pay for them? They ask that when it comes to infrastructure spending. Well, where's all that money going to come from? But they don't ask the question when they talk about tax cuts. Where's that money going to come from? That's coming from the Treasury. It's the same process. It's just not infrastructure spending. And yet, I find the media really doesn't answer that question. So, I do kind of think it's funny Trump is golfing during all of this, says Cindy. I do too. That's what he does. Trump's really a golfer and a retiree. You understand that? I mean, you're not voting for a guy who's like, he's a public servant when he's not in office. This guy's never been a public servant. He got into politics to build his brand, didn't think he was going to win. Read the Michael Lewis book, Fifth Risk. Read the David K. Johnston books. There are 3 of them. Donald Trump didn't think he was going to win. Then there was a scramble once he did win, and then he was like a, who's in charge type thing. And there was a halo effect of that for a time. But he's essentially a golfer. He doesn't want to be president. He wants to set up hotels, resorts, and have power so that people have to call him Mr. President, and people can then funnel money through those various entities that he has set up to essentially buy decision-making. That's the way the first administration worked. And the other thing he can do, of course, and he did a lot of this and he's still doing it, is he takes all of our money because it's Secret Service money and he drives it to all of his properties. So I told you before, when Trump is considering going to Bedminster, let's say, and spending the weekend there, the Secret Service has to buy a whole bunch of rooms because he's considering going there. At the same time, he might go to Mar-a-Lago. And so the Secret Service has to buy a bulk of rooms there. So in all of these ways, and as you know, Trump says he gives the Secret Service a deal, but it's already been demonstrated that the U.S. taxpayer is paying top rack rate at all of his various properties. So I'm suggesting, golfer, Fox News watcher, that's your Donald Trump. Biden, in and out, certainly doesn't have the strength he does in some of the videos you'll see from a few years ago, but he doesn't seem completely out of it either. So that the notion somehow that it's weekend at Bernie's and they're propping him up, I just don't think that holds water either. Yeah, here we go. Here's Randy. I like to run around the schoolyard with Randy. My earlier point, Mark, was the president sets the agenda and focus for his presidency for the most part. How do you think we ended up with the ACA, for example? Obamacare, right? Because Obama made it a priority. I get it, Randy, I do. But you said I'm not voting for an administration. I'm voting for the chief executive. And I'm telling you, now you say, well, the focus for his agency is established by, or for his administration is established by the president. Okay, but that's slightly different than what you said before. You before made it more black and white. So, shadow producer Calvin Wong says emoluments clause broken, paid with Saudi Arabia money. Saudi Arabia did. They did. They bought a lot. They bought actually entire floors of Trump properties when they had something before.
Saudi Arabia pays cash.
Yeah, Saudi Arabia pays cash. Anyway, well, I could talk all day, but I already have.
You lay it all out like that, and it's so frustrating that it's allowed to continue unchecked.
Yeah, it's we're in a weird place in this country now. Secret Service, it's pointed out by Underdog, also has to rent golf carts and pay exorbitant amounts for meals. Yeah, there's a way that Trump continues to, it's nickel dime compared to like the bigger stuff, but it's not nickel dime, All right. I don't know what else I can do, Tony, so I'm going to...
The Mark Thompson Show.
I can't believe it either. This is the... I can't believe that I'm having to wrap up. What is the problem?
You turned blurry all of a sudden.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to shock it back in. How do I do it, Tony? Like that?
Just hold your hand up to a minute, and it should come back. Should. There you go.
There you go.
Luis!
Better.
Where is the economy in ruins? I'm seeing full stadiums and arenas at my games and shows, people paying hundreds for stupid bobbleheads and Stanley Cups. Are these now essentials? Yeah. Where is this economy that is in ruins? Very, very well done. Big shout out.
Big shout out.
All right. The After Party Live is going down now.
Woo!
I'm Shadow Stevens for the Mark Thompson Show. Bye-bye.
Tony rejoins us tomorrow. David K. Johnston tomorrow. After Party goes down now. Thanks for all the love. Until tomorrow. Bye-bye.